Ladies and gentlemen, there comes a moment in every life when the noise around us grows so loud that we forget to listen to the whisper of God within us. We spend our days defending ourselves, proving ourselves, explaining ourselves, arguing with people who were never assigned to understand our journey. But when you finally lay down the need to fight every battle, when you release the urge to answer every insult, when you choose peace over proving a point, something holy begins to move. God steps into the space where your silence becomes your strength. And in that silence, miracles begin to unfold. When you choose silence, you are not choosing weakness, you are choosing wisdom. Silence has always been one of God's oldest languages, a sacred space where the heart can finally hear what the world has been trying to cover. There is a depth in silence that arguing can never touch. Arguing fills the room with noise, but silence fills the soul with understanding. It is in that quiet place where God begins to reveal what was hidden beneath layers of frustration, anger, and exhaustion. Silence is not simply the absence of words. It is the presence of awareness. It is the moment when your spirit becomes still enough to recognize what is truly happening around you and within you. It allows you to step back and see where God is guiding you, how He is shaping you, and what He is calling you to release. So many people speak not because they have something meaningful to say, but because their fears demand attention. But when you embrace silence, you learn that fear loses its power the moment you stop feeding it with words. Silence teaches the heart to stand firm, to breathe deeply, and to trust that everything does not require your response. When life becomes filled with conflict, drama, and arguments, the soul becomes crowded. A crowded soul cannot hear God clearly. It becomes cluttered with the opinions of others, the demands of the world, the impulses of the ego, and the emotional residue of past battles. Silence clears that space. It doesn't erase the challenges in your life, but it gives you the vision to see them differently. When you stop arguing, you realize how much energy you were giving to things that did not deserve your strength. You start to see how many conversations you were engaging in that were robbing you of your peace. You begin to understand how often you were fighting to be right instead of choosing to be aligned with what God wanted for you. Silence is the doorway into that alignment. It pulls you away from distractions, away from unnecessary confrontations, away from battles that have no reward, and in that open, uncluttered space, your clarity grows. Clarity is not always a loud revelation. Often it is a gentle unfolding. God rarely shouts, He whispers. And to hear a whisper, you must be quiet within yourself. Silence creates that inner quiet. It invites your mind to slow down long enough to recognize the difference between what is urgent and what is important. Most arguments are urgent. They demand immediate reaction, immediate anger, immediate defense. But the things God speaks into your life are important. They require patience, reflection, and a listening heart. Silence reconnects you to those important things. It reminds you that you are not defined by the opinions of those who misunderstand you. It reminds you that your worth is not diminished by someone else's loudness. It reminds you that peace is not something handed to you by other people. It is something that grows from the inside out. And the soil in which it grows best is silence. When you choose silence, you choose spiritual clarity. You learn to discern between what was sent to grow you and what was sent to distract you. Not every challenge needs your voice. Not every conflict requires your explanation. Some battles are meant to be walked away from, not because you are afraid, but because you are wise enough to see that the fight is beneath the destiny God has placed within you. Silence teaches you that real strength is not proven in how loudly you speak, but in how confidently you stay grounded. The quiet soul is a strong soul. A quiet soul knows who it is without needing constant verification. A quiet soul listens more than it reacts. A quiet soul watches more than it accuses. A quiet soul trusts more than it fears. And when your soul becomes quiet, you start to see how God has been moving in your life all along. Silence reveals truths that arguments try to hide. In arguments, pride rises quickly. Ego becomes louder than understanding. Hurt becomes louder than healing. But silence brings everything back into balance. It gives you room to examine your own feelings without the rush of defensiveness. It gives you room to ask yourself why certain things trigger you, why certain people disturb your peace, why certain words cut deeper than they should. Silence is not only a space for listening to God, it is a space for listening to yourself. It is a space where you learn what parts of you need healing, what parts of you need releasing, and what parts of you need strengthening. It is a space where you learn to observe your emotions without being consumed by them. And as you observe them, you gain clarity about who you are becoming. Silence also reveals who truly belongs in your life. When you stop arguing with people, their intentions become clear. Those who were only drawn to you for conflict will drift away. Those who were feeding on your reactions will lose their appetite. Those who thrived on misunderstanding you will search for another target. Silence exposes the hearts of others. It shows you who respects your peace and who is irritated by it. It shows you who values your growth and who feels threatened by it. It shows you who loves you in truth and who loved only the drama surrounding you. Silence teaches you that clarity is not only about seeing yourself more clearly, but about seeing your relationships through God's eyes. In silence, you also grow emotionally. You learn patience because you are not rushing into every verbal battle. You learn self-control because you are not letting anger dictate your actions. You learn humility because you realize that not every situation requires your viewpoint. You learn resilience because you rise above the noise instead of sinking into it. You learn compassion because you begin to understand that some people argue not because they are right, but because they are hurting. And when you understand that, you no longer feel the need to match their aggression. Instead, you offer them the gift of your calm. Silence is not passive. Silence is powerful. It softens your heart without weakening your spirit. It steadies your mind without dulling your voice. It allows you to protect your peace without abandoning your truth. Spiritual clarity grows stronger as you become more comfortable with silence. You start to recognize when God is telling you to step back, when He is inviting you to wait, when He is urging you to trust Him instead of your emotions. You start to understand that silence is not the absence of action. It is often the preparation for divine intervention. It is in silence that God aligns your path. It is in silence that He rearranges situations, closes doors that were leading you astray, opens doors that you were too distracted to notice, and strengthens you for the blessings ahead. Silence is the workshop of transformation. When you stop arguing, you stop interrupting the very process that God is using to shape your destiny. Silence also deepens your faith. When you are not busy arguing, you have more room to reflect on how far God has brought you. You remember the moments when you thought you would break but somehow kept standing. You remember the storms you survived, the battles you won, the prayers that were answered in ways you didn't expect. Silence brings you back to gratitude, and gratitude is one of the clearest forms of spiritual clarity. It opens your eyes to blessings you overlooked. It opens your heart to love you had forgotten. It opens your spirit to opportunities waiting just beyond your frustration. Silence also helps you separate your desires from God's direction. Sometimes we argue because we are fighting for what we want instead of trusting what God wants for us. In silence, you can finally ask yourself whether the thing you are fighting for is truly aligned with your purpose, whether the relationship you are defending is healthy, whether the path you are insisting on is fruitful, whether the situation you refuse to release is worth your peace. In silence, you learn to surrender your plans so that God's plan can unfold without your resistance. And once you surrender, clarity becomes even deeper. You stop trying to force outcomes. You stop chasing validation. You stop correcting every misunderstanding. You stop explaining yourself to those committed to misinterpreting you. You simply live in peace, trusting that God sees what others overlook and understands what others distort. Silence becomes your sanctuary. It becomes the place where you meet God without the clutter of noise. It becomes the place where your spirit can breathe freely after being suffocated by chaos. It becomes the place where your truth rises gently, where your intuition speaks confidently, where your resilience grows quietly. Silence becomes the classroom in which God teaches you what arguments could never reveal. It is in silence that your identity strengthens, your purpose clarifies, your faith deepens, and your destiny unfolds, layer by layer, breath by breath, moment by moment, teaching you that peace is a choice, clarity is a gift, and silence is the bridge between the two. Letting go of arguments is more than choosing silence. It is choosing to protect the sacred ground of your inner peace. Peace is not something the world hands you. It is something you must nurture, water, and guard the way a gardener tends to the most fragile part of their field. When you decide that your peace is worth more than being right, more than proving a point, more than winning an argument, you shift into a higher version of yourself. You come to understand that not everything deserves your reaction, that not every voice around you has a right to shape your emotional world, and that not every battle is worthy of your presence. Letting go is not about losing. It is about preserving the parts of yourself that keep you whole. It is about choosing strength wrapped in softness rather than strength wrapped in noise. You begin to realize that walking away from conflict is not surrendering your power, it is reclaiming it. Arguments drain the soul. They pull you into emotional quicksand where every word sinks deeper than the last one. The more you try to pull yourself out through words, the deeper you feel pulled into frustration. When a person argues, they are not always trying to solve something. Often they are trying to validate their hurt, defend their pride, or express something they do not have the emotional maturity to communicate gently. When you step away from such battles, you are refusing to let someone else's chaos become your home. You are refusing to let their unhealed wounds cut your spirit. You are refusing to let their desire for drama disturb your spiritual alignment. You choose to protect your peace the way a mother protects her child, with gentleness but with firmness, with compassion but with boundaries, with patience but with wisdom. Letting go of arguments teaches you self-respect. You begin to understand that your voice remains powerful even when you do not use it to fight. You realize that your silence is not submission, but self-preservation. You recognize that your emotional energy is precious, that your mental clarity is valuable, and that your spiritual center is sacred. When you guard those things, you honor yourself. You treat yourself as someone worthy of peace. You choose environments, conversations, and relationships that reflect the level of peace you desire. Your spirit becomes selective, not out of arrogance, but out of awareness. You understand that anyone who truly values you will not constantly pull you into conflict. Anyone who genuinely loves you will not demand that you sacrifice your peace to satisfy their anger. Anyone who belongs in your life will not make you feel guilty for choosing harmony over hostility. Letting go of arguments also opens your eyes to how much of life you were missing when you were distracted by conflict. Arguments steal time. They steal moments you can never reclaim. They steal energy that could have been used for creating, growing, resting, or connecting with people who uplift you. When you stop participating in unnecessary battles, you suddenly find yourself with more mental space. You have more calm mornings, more peaceful evenings, more clarity in your thoughts, and more emotional room to breathe. You start noticing beauty again, the way sunlight softens a room, the way ordinary sounds carry rhythm, the way small blessings appear where stress used to live. Peace sharpens your senses. It allows you to feel life again instead of merely reacting to it. Letting go of arguments protects your joy. Joy cannot grow in a heart that is constantly fighting. Joy requires stillness. It requires a soil that is not torn up by conflict. It requires emotional sunlight, the kind that shines only when you learn to step away from things that dim your spirit. When you refuse to argue, you protect that joy. You protect that smile that comes naturally. You protect that glow that others can see even when you don't notice it yourself. You protect that laughter that rises from a place deeper than happiness. Arguments take all of that away because they force you to dwell in negative energy, but walking away gently closes the door to negativity and opens a window to joy. Letting go does not make you indifferent, it makes you intentional. You learn that you can care deeply about someone without engaging in every disagreement. You learn that you can love someone without attending every argument they invite you to. You learn that you can respect someone without letting them drag you into emotional storms. Your heart becomes wiser. You start to accept that some people argue not because they are right, but because they need to feel heard. Some argue because they are hurting. Some argue because they do not know another way to express their fears. Some argue because silence terrifies them. And when you recognize this, you stop seeing their arguments as personal attacks and start seeing them as emotional projections. This shift helps you respond with compassion instead of conflict. It helps you hold space for others without losing space within yourself. Letting go of arguments is also an act of spiritual surrender. It is saying, I trust God more than I trust my need to respond. It is saying, I choose peace because peace is where God's voice is clearest. When you stop arguing, you allow God to fight the battles you were never meant to fight alone. Arguments are often rooted in the desire to control outcomes, defend reputations, or prove truths. But the moment you let go, you release control and trust that God will handle what you cannot. You trust that He sees everything you stay silent about. You trust that He knows how to defend you without your voice ever entering the battlefield. You trust that He works behind the scenes even when you say nothing at all. This trust strengthens your spirit because you begin to rely more on divine wisdom than on human reaction. Letting go of arguments protects your mental health. Constant conflict wears down the nervous system. It tightens the chest, burdens the mind, and creates tension where there should be ease. When you step away from chaos, your body breathes differently. Your shoulders soften, your breath deepens, your mind settles, your heart feels lighter. Peace becomes a physical feeling as much as a spiritual one. You sleep better. You think clearer. You move slower, not out of laziness, but out of calm intention. Your days feel less rushed, your conversations feel kinder, and your emotions feel more balanced. Protecting your peace is not selfish, it is self-care, it is emotional hygiene, it is spiritual maintenance. You cannot pour love, wisdom, clarity, or strength into the world when you are constantly drained by conflict. Letting go also teaches you boundaries. You learn how to step back, how to say no, how to walk away, how to disengage, and how to guard your heart without hardening it. Boundaries do not push people away. They protect the healthiest version of you. And when you are healthy, your presence becomes a blessing to those around you. Boundaries help you choose relationships that nourish your soul rather than drain it. You learn to say, I love you, but I cannot keep arguing with you. You learn to say, I care about us, but I must care about my peace too. You learn to say, I will listen, but I will not fight. These statements are not walls. They are doors into a healthier emotional environment. Letting go of arguments helps you grow. Every time you walk away from unnecessary conflict, you strengthen your discipline. You strengthen your emotional intelligence. You strengthen your spiritual awareness. You strengthen your ability to choose peace over pride. Growth does not always happen in loud breakthroughs. Often it happens in quiet decisions. The decision not to react. The decision not to escalate. The decision not to respond in anger, the decision not to fight fire with fire. These small decisions accumulate over time and shape you into someone wiser, calmer, stronger, and more grounded. You begin to recognize your triggers not as weaknesses, but as invitations for healing. Instead of reacting instantly, you pause, you breathe, you reflect. You choose your response with care. That is growth. That is maturity. That is emotional evolution. Letting go of arguments also brings you closer to yourself. You begin to hear your own thoughts more clearly when they are not clouded by frustration. You begin to understand your own emotional needs. You begin to appreciate your own presence. You begin to enjoy your own company. Peace teaches you to like yourself again. It teaches you to sit quietly and feel safe within your own stillness. It teaches you that you do not need constant external interaction to feel alive. Peace becomes your companion, your guide, your comfort. And as you grow more comfortable in peace, you attract people who respect that peaceful energy instead of disturbing it. Letting go allows your life to soften. Softness is not weakness. It is strength wrapped in grace. It is power that does not need aggression to prove itself. It is confidence that does not need control to feel secure. It is maturity that does not need noise to feel significant. This softness helps you navigate life with more compassion and less tension. It helps you forgive more, release more, understand more. It helps you see beyond the surface of conflict and understand the deeper truths hidden within human behavior. Letting go of arguments helps you step into emotional freedom. You stop feeling responsible for fixing everyone. You stop carrying the weight of every disagreement. You stop trying to convince, correct, or convert people who are unwilling to listen. Your emotional world becomes lighter. You begin to recognize the difference between people who seek clarity and people who seek chaos. You give your energy only to those who value it. You share your heart only with those who honor it. You offer your wisdom only to those who are ready to receive it. Emotional freedom is realizing that your peace is not up for negotiation. It is realizing that no argument is worth losing yourself. It is realizing that walkaway power is spiritual power. Letting go is a form of healing. It heals the parts of you that once reacted out of pain. It heals the parts of you that once believed you needed to fight to be heard. It heals the parts of you that once equated loudness with strength. It heals the parts of you that once thought your voice had to compete to matter. Healing comes quietly, gently, steadily, as you choose peace again and again and again. It comes each time you take the higher road, each time you preserve your calm, each time you refuse to let conflict dim your light. When you step away from arguments and release the battles that were never assigned to you, something sacred begins to shift in your life. You begin to understand that God does not require your voice in every conflict, nor your strength in every struggle. There are battles He never intended for you to fight with your hands or your words. There are storms you were only meant to walk through, not wrestle within. When you stop trying to control, correct, convince, or confront everything and everyone, you open the door for divine intervention. You create a spiritual stillness that invites God to work in ways that arguing could never accomplish. You allow His hands to enter places your voice can no longer reach. You allow His wisdom to move through situations your emotions cannot fix. You give Him room to transform outcomes that would only become worse if you continued pushing in your own strength. Arguments are rooted in human limits. They come from a place of fear, frustration, pride, or misunderstanding. They rely on logic, emotion, and personal will. But when you release the need to argue, you step into the realm of spiritual power. This is the realm where God rewrites narratives, softens hearts, reveals intentions, exposes truth, and brings clarity to confusion. He moves in silence, in stillness, in surrender. The moment you say, "God, I am stepping out of this battle," is the same moment He steps in with His divine authority. There is a kind of strength in silence that human effort cannot imitate, because silence allows God to speak, to intervene, and to shift things you never could have shifted on your own. When you stop arguing, you stop resisting the process God is trying to unfold in your life. Sometimes the conflict itself is allowed so that you can learn to release your ego. Sometimes the tension is allowed so that you can grow in patience. Sometimes the misunderstanding is allowed so that you can learn the power of stillness. Sometimes the insult is allowed so that you can rise above the need for validation. And sometimes the entire argument is allowed because God is using it to separate you from environments that cannot hold your next level. When you continue to argue, you hold on to places where God is trying to move you away from. When you continue to fight, you block the exit door He opened for your healing. When you continue to explain, you drain energy meant for your purpose. But when you stop arguing, you stop resisting. You stop clinging. You stop forcing your way into rooms that cannot contain the future version of you. You allow God to guide you gently, redirect you gracefully, and reposition you purposely. There are people you will never win with because God is protecting you by not letting you win. Their spirit is not aligned with where He is taking you. Their heart is not open to the truth you carry. Their mind is not ready to understand your growth. You could argue for hours, days, even years, and nothing would change. But the moment you walk away, the moment you choose silence, the moment you release the conversation, God takes over. He begins to shift things behind the scenes. He begins to soften hearts you could not reach. He begins to expose intentions you could not see. He begins to bring peace into places you could not calm. He begins to open doors you were too distracted to notice. And He begins to close doors you were too emotionally attached to shut. When you stop arguing, you give God space to work in the hearts of others. You allow Him to convict, correct, guide, and reveal. Your silence becomes a spiritual seed. It grows in ways you cannot see. It moves in ways you cannot predict. It transforms in ways you cannot manufacture. Silence becomes the fertile ground where God plants His divine solutions. While you are quiet on the outside, God is working on the inside hearts, inside situations, inside relationships, inside environments. He handles the things your voice cannot reach. He touches the areas your arguments cannot penetrate. He repairs what your frustration could only damage. He brings clarity where your explanations failed. He delivers peace where your anger only created more chaos. There are battles you think you must fight, but God never asked you to fight them. Some arguments you think you must win, but God never asked you to win them. Some conflicts you think you must resolve, but God is calling you to step aside so He can resolve them His way. When you release the fight, you release the pressure. You release the burden. You release the weight. You release the emotional load you were never designed to carry. God is not asking you to be the warrior in every situation. Sometimes He wants to be the warrior. Sometimes He wants to show you that your peace is more powerful than your anger. Sometimes He wants to show you that your silence is stronger than your explanation. Sometimes He wants to show you that He fights better than you do. When you step aside, you do not lose control. You surrender control to the one who can handle it better. You stop trying to be your own defender, your own judge, your own protector, your own vindicator. You allow God to take His rightful place. You allow Him to defend you without needing your voice. You allow Him to fight for you without needing your words. You allow Him to bring justice without needing your involvement. When you stop arguing, you place your trust in the divine instead of relying on your emotions. You place your outcomes in His hands. Instead of trying to force situations into shape, you place your peace above your pride. When God works, He works in ways that surpass understanding. He works in ways that silence your critics without you speaking a word. He works in ways that remove people who were harming you without you lifting a finger. He works in ways that make wrong things right, crooked paths straight, heavy burdens light. He works in ways that shift the atmosphere of your life, moving you from tension to tranquility, from chaos to clarity, from conflict to calm. He works in ways that remind you that your silence was not emptiness, it was spiritual alignment, it was obedience, it was trust, it was faith in action. When you stop arguing, you also stop distracting yourself from what God is trying to teach you. Arguments pull you away from your purpose. They pull you away from your calling. They pull you away from the higher frequency where God is trying to elevate you. Conflict lowers your vibration. It pulls your spirit downward into frustration, anger, and emotional exhaustion. But when you release the battle, your spirit rises. You rise into clarity. You rise into calmness. You rise into a deeper understanding of who you are. You rise into spiritual maturity. You rise into wisdom. You rise into the version of yourself that God has been waiting for you to become. Letting God work requires trust. It requires patience. It requires humility. It requires laying down your need to be right. It requires stepping away even when your emotions want to pull you back into the argument. It requires choosing peace even when chaos tries to provoke you. It requires believing that God sees what you see and sees what you do not see. It requires knowing that He is working even when you cannot. Feel movement. It requires faith in the unseen, the unspoken, the unargued. When you stop arguing, something else happens. You begin to hear God more clearly. Arguments drown out the voice of the divine. Noise drowns out guidance. Conflict drowns out intuition, but silence opens your inner ear. It allows spiritual whispers to reach you. It allows your heart to sense direction. It allows your soul to feel alignment. You begin to feel when God is steering you away from someone. You begin to sense when He is calling you toward a new season. You begin to recognize when He is telling you to let something go. You begin to trust the quiet nudges that tell you when to walk away, when to pause, when to shift. Walking away from arguments also teaches you the power of spiritual boundaries. You begin to understand that God did not create you to be drained by conflict. He created you to shine, to grow, to evolve, to rise. Constant arguing keeps you stuck at the same level. Release allows elevation. Release allows transformation. Release allows restoration. Release allows God to bring new people, new opportunities, new blessings into your life. But He cannot bring newness into a life still cluttered with conflict. He cannot fill a heart still filled with noise. He cannot bless a soul still entangled in unnecessary battles. When you stop arguing, you unclutter your spirit. You create room for blessings that require peace to flourish. You also begin to understand that arguments are often invitations to stay connected to things that God is trying to separate you from. The more you argue, the longer you stay tied to places that drain you. But the moment you stop arguing, the moment you step back, the moment you choose peace, the connection begins to loosen. God begins to remove you gently from environments that do not nourish your growth. He begins to unhook you from situations that hold you back. He begins to separate you from energies that disturb your peace. When you stop arguing, you begin to walk in spiritual authority. You carry yourself differently. You speak with more clarity. You move with more intention. You love with more maturity. You respond with more wisdom. You choose your battles with more discernment. You understand that not everything deserves your engagement, and not everyone deserves your emotional access. You no longer fight for attention, validation, or approval. You let peace be your signature. You let stillness be your strength. You let God be your defender. When God works, He works in silence, in stillness, in subtle shifts that change everything without announcing anything. Your role is to step aside, release the argument, and allow Him the space to do what your voice could never accomplish. Your silence becomes the beginning of His movement. Your surrender becomes the beginning of His strategy. Your calm becomes the beginning of His breakthrough. And your decision to stop arguing becomes the doorway through which His divine intervention enters your life. There comes a moment in every life when you realize that peace is not something you visit from time to time. It is a place you must learn to live in. It is a home for the soul, a sanctuary for the heart, a refuge for the mind. But peace does not simply appear because you wish for it. Peace comes when you make room for it, when you protect it, when you choose it above the noise, the arguments, and the burdens you once carried as if they were your responsibility. When you stop arguing, you create a spiritual environment where peace can bloom, grow, and take root. Peace becomes the soil where your joy grows and the air your spirit breathes. Peace becomes the gentle rhythm guiding your days, the quiet wisdom shaping your decisions, and the steady light illuminating your path forward. When you release the weight of conflict, you step into a softer, calmer, wiser version of yourself, the version God has been patiently shaping within you. Peace is not the absence of problems. It is the presence of divine alignment. It is the ability to stand in the middle of life's uncertainties without being shaken by them. It is the ability to breathe in the face of misunderstanding, to remain grounded in the face of provocation, to remain kind in the face of pettiness. Peace is spiritual strength wrapped inside gentleness. It is the strength to walk away when your ego wants to stay and argue. It is the strength to be silent when your emotions want to overpower your wisdom. It is the strength to pause, breathe, reflect, and choose the higher road. Peace does not scream for attention. It whispers, it nudges, it calls you inward, where God's presence lives. It teaches you to watch without reacting, to listen without absorbing, to feel without letting the feelings swallow you whole. When you stop arguing, you reclaim the emotional territory that conflict once stole from you. You reclaim your mornings, your evenings, your sleep, your laughter. You reclaim the parts of yourself you abandoned while trying to win battles that were never meant to shape your destiny. Peace is not merely a feeling. It is a form of protection. It shields your heart from unnecessary wounds. It shields your mind from unnecessary chaos. It shields your spirit from unnecessary heaviness. It creates a barrier between your soul and the world's noise. When you live in peace, the world still speaks, but you no longer feel obligated to respond to everything it says. You understand that not every voice deserves your energy. Not every tension deserves your reaction. Not every invitation to conflict deserves your presence. Peace is also a teacher. It teaches you where you belong and where you do not. It teaches you whom to trust and whom to release. It teaches you which environments nourish you and which ones drain you. It teaches you the difference between fighting for something and fighting with something. Peace gives you the clarity to see what is worth holding on to and what must be let go. When you embrace peace, you begin to realize how much emotional baggage you were carrying that did not belong to you. You begin to set down what was never yours. You begin to detach from situations that thrive on draining your spirit. And as you release these weights, your soul begins to rise. You rise into clarity. You rise into understanding. You rise into a deeper awareness of who you are and who you are becoming. When you stop arguing, your life begins to soften. Hardness fades, tension loosens. The constant urgency you once felt begins to dissolve. You start moving with intention rather than impulse. You start speaking with purpose rather than reaction. You start walking with calmness rather than defensiveness. This softness does not make you weak. It makes you untouchable by negativity. It makes you a vessel that carries peace wherever you go. People feel it when you walk into a room. They sense it in your presence. They see it in your eyes. They notice it in the way you choose your words with care. Peace becomes your signature, the quiet power that speaks louder than any argument ever could. Peace also transforms your relationships. When you refuse to argue, you begin to see people for who they are, not for the role they play in your conflicts. You start noticing the wounds behind their words. You see their fears, their insecurities, their unhealed places, and your response shifts. You begin to meet frustration with understanding, anger with patience, disrespect with boundaries. You stop trying to fix people with arguments and start protecting yourself with silence. This shift creates space for healthier communication, for deeper connections, for honest reflection. Some relationships will grow stronger because of your commitment to peace. Others will fall away. Both outcomes are divine. Peace reveals who truly belongs in your life and who only thrives in chaos. Peace also shapes your decision-making. When your mind is not clouded by conflict, you make choices from a place of clarity rather than emotional chaos. You see your next steps with fresh eyes. You begin to trust your intuition more deeply. You begin to hear God's whispers more clearly. You begin to move with confidence, not because the path is easy, but because your spirit is steady. When you live in peace, you no longer rush decisions. You no longer react impulsively. You no longer feel pressured to please others. Your choices become intentional, grounded, and aligned with your purpose. When you stop arguing, you also heal the parts of yourself that once needed to defend everything. You heal the part of you that once equated loudness with power. You heal the part of you that once believed conflict was proof of strength. You heal the part of you that once felt threatened by the silence of others. Healing comes softly, often in the quiet spaces you create when you stop fighting battles that do not belong to you. Healing arrives when you give yourself permission to rest, to breathe, to release. Healing is the invisible transformation happening beneath the surface of your peace. It is the restoration of your emotional resilience. It is the renewal of your inner calm. It is the strengthening of your spiritual core. Living in peace also means learning the value of emotional distance. You realize that you can love people deeply without absorbing their chaos. You can care for others without drowning in their storms. You can be present without being entangled. Emotional distance is not coldness, it is wisdom. It is knowing where you end and someone else begins. It is protecting your inner world while still showing compassion to the outer world. This emotional distance allows you to stay peaceful even when the world around you is not. It allows you to hold steady even when others lose their balance. It allows you to remain calm even when others try to provoke your reactions. When you stop arguing, your life begins to align with a quieter rhythm. You discover that you no longer need to explain yourself to everyone. You no longer need to justify your decisions. You no longer need to apologize for choosing your well-being. Your life becomes simpler, cleaner, more honest. You surround yourself with people who value peace as much as you do. You choose conversations that uplift you. You choose environments that nourish you. You choose relationships that respect you. And in these choices, your life becomes a reflection of your inner calm. Peace also gives you strength to walk away from things that once held you hostage. You walk away from conversations that drain you. You walk away from conflicts that distort you. You walk away from people who break your spirit. You walk away from environments that dim your light. Walking away is not abandonment, it is alignment. It is choosing to protect your spirit rather than sacrifice it. It is choosing to honor your growth rather than hinder it. It is choosing to move forward rather than stay stuck in cycles of conflict. As you embrace peace, you also discover the power of stillness. Stillness allows you to reconnect with your own heartbeat. It allows you to hear the quiet truths within you. It allows you to rest in the presence of God without the noise of the world interrupting the conversation. In stillness, you remember who you are when you are not fighting battles, defending yourself, or reacting to others. In stillness, you rediscover the essence of your being. You rediscover your strength, your wisdom, your softness, your resilience. You rediscover the part of you that was buried beneath years of conflict and emotional exhaustion. Peace also transforms the way you view the future. When you are no longer battling the present, you begin to dream again. You begin to envision possibilities rather than dwell on problems. You begin to imagine what your life could look like when it is not weighed down by conflict. Peace gives you hope. It gives you courage. It gives you the freedom to expand, to grow, to evolve. It reminds you that you were created for more than arguments, more than stress, more than the constant need to defend yourself. You were created to rise, to shine, to thrive. When you stop arguing, you start evolving. You evolve into a calmer, wiser, more grounded version of yourself. You evolve into someone who chooses understanding over reaction, compassion over anger, stillness over chaos. You evolve into someone who moves gracefully through life, trusting that God fights for you, protects you, guides you, and keeps you. Peace becomes the quiet revolution taking place within your soul. It becomes the new foundation upon which you build your future. It becomes the melody that moves with you, the light that accompanies you, the strength that sustains you as you continue walking your path with grace, wisdom, and unshakable calm.